Okay, class, welcome to our first remote recorded lecture. Hopefully you will find this format useful and user-friendly. I'm going to work through the slides, hopefully do some annotations, and maybe put some videos in for demonstration here and there. So let's get started. We are going to start our course here to try to understand some of the terms, medical terminology, that we will be using in class and that you will eventually be hearing and using yourself in practice. So we're going to call this medical terminology. And why is it important? Well, in the medical world, veterinary medicine included, this type of terminology is used commonplace. And if you don't understand what someone is telling you or saying to you, then obviously you'll be lost. So I'm going to show you a little clip of a video that's here at this YouTube address. And I want you to listen and see, if you understand what this veterinarian is saying or not. And once we've watched it, then we will come back and we will dissect some of the words and talk about how we can gain an understanding of this particular language.
A second indication for permanent urine diversion would be urethral stricture rostral to the scrotal site caused by stones or previous surgery in the proximal urethra. Finally, neoplastic disease of the penis or prepuce may involve aggressive surgical excision necessitating urinary diversion by urethrostomy.
So from that video, hopefully I'm going to add in a whiteboard slide here. Hopefully you got some idea of what some of the terms might be that are used in veterinary practice. So this particular doctor, he's talking about something called a urethrostomy. So what we need to do when we see or hear a word like this, and for me, I'm visual, so seeing it helps me a lot. But dissecting the word is very important. So when we see a word like urethrostomy, what you want to do is you want to break it down into parts. So urethro is one part of this word, and that simply means just what it sounds like, or pretty much sounds like, which is urethra. Urethra is the tube that we pee through, basically, so the tube that connects the bladder to the outside. Then you want to look at this other term or ending of the word, which is stomy. And stomy is a word that means mouth-like opening, or basically just an opening. So when we put the two together, we come up with a term that means an opening in the urethra, or mouth-like or round opening in the urethra. And this is exactly what this particular surgery is doing. It's creating an opening in the urethra to help the animal to pass urine, especially if that animal has a problem with urinary stones that might get lodged or stuck in the urethra and block the flow of urine. So that's one of the main terms he uses. Now he also throws out some terms like rostral, I think, was one that was in the little clip we watched. Rostral is just a term for directions, and it means towards the nose. So if you're describing where you're going to make an incision, for instance, then you might use this term to indicate, from a particular part of the body, more towards the nose is where the incision is made. So we can see a variety of terms, whether they're indicating a direction, indicating a anatomical structure, a particular surgical procedure, like stomy is the surgical procedure to create this opening. And we can create all kinds of special words that are going to mean something very particular. So again, just going back to this, the terminology is going to be used on a day-to-day regular basis. And if you don't understand it, you'll be lost. Okay. So what are the parts of these words? As we just broke down a couple of words there, we were identifying some of these word parts. For instance, the root. The root is the main part of the word that gives it its main meaning. And then we can add something to the beginning, a prefix, or something to the end, a suffix, that can add to that meaning. So urethra, and then stomy. When we put prefixes, suffixes, and root words together, there's often a vowel that might connect those word parts. So we call that the combining vowel, and it depends on the word, but often it's O. And when you put them all together, basically the rule that I use, or that I tell folks to use, is when you're putting the words together, make it so that it is the easiest form to pronounce. And as we get further along, I'll show you some examples of that. So here's an example of a term, subcutaneous, which you may have heard before. And it contains a prefix, sub, which means below, a root word, cutaneo, which means skin, and then a suffix, ous, which means pertaining to. And so when we put all these together, we get this term that means, in one word, pertaining to under the skin, subcutaneous. And you can see down here in the picture that we've got this needle that is penetrating the skin, the connective tissue under the skin, and then what's called the subcutaneous tissue, which is mostly fat tissue. And that's where this injection is going to be made, and hence we term it a subcutaneous injection. One term, basically equals a whole sentence worth of meaning. And the other beautiful thing about medical terminology is that it's basically the same around the world. So it's based usually on Latin and or Greek, Greek is still a used language, but Latin is not heavily used as an active language. But around the world, we can use these terms and people understand what they mean regardless of what their first language is. Okay, so compound terms can also occur, which means we put two roots together, and there may also be a prefix or a suffix. So some good examples are shown here: ovariohysterectomy, pododermatitis, and electrocardiograph. Now, when you look at these words, they often look very long, and they might be kind of inhibited because it seems like it's really hard to pronounce. But the more you practice with these, the better you will get, the more comfortable you will be, I promise. So let's break these words down and look at some pictures that kind of help us to understand what they mean. So ovariohysterectomy is a common term that is used in the vet hospital. Sometimes it's even called OVH, ovariohysterectomy. But it's basically a scientific term for this, SPAY, which means surgical removal, because surgical removal is this last suffix piece, ectomy, that's what that means, of the ovaries, which is the ovario piece, and uterus, which is the hysterectomy, or hysterecto piece. So we put all those three together, we get this term ovariohysterectomy, which is a medical term for SPAY. Okay, sorry, let's move on here. So pododermatitis. Pododerma and itis, those are the parts of the word in this particular term. So podo means foot, derma or dermato means skin, and then itis, our suffix on the end here, means inflammation. So we get this one term, pododermatitis, that means inflammation of the skin of the foot, which you can see clearly here with this red inflamed skin on this poor little puppy dog's foot. And then here's a term for a diagnostic procedure, electrocardiograph, or you probably have heard of an EKG or an ECG. Those are abbreviations for this particular procedure. Graph or graphy means recording. Electro would be the electrical activity, and then the cardio piece, of course, is the heart. So we come up with this term, electrocardiograph. Shown here, the dog is having this recording or tracing done, which is reflective of the electrical activity in the heart. So the next several slides are going to be some examples of some of the more commonly used either root words, suffixes, or prefixes. I'm not going to go through each one, but I do suggest that you write all these down, maybe make flashcards, somehow get yourself a list of these words and study them, memorize them basically until you can see entero and know automatically it means intestines, or arthro and know, oh, that refers to joints. Okay, so these are common root words. Here's some more. And this is just a very small select list of the root words. There are entire books, entire dictionaries of medical terms. So what I'm trying to do is give you some of the more common ones to get you started. Some really common prefixes, again, many more than what we have here. But here are some of those common prefixes. Do the same thing with these. Memorize them, make flashcards, drill yourself, whatever it takes, so that you know, for instance, sub means below. And for some of these, you might realize that there are words you already know that contain these. For instance, submarine. Submarine is, a vehicle, a boat that goes below, sub, the water, marine. So when you start kind of applying these to words that you already know the meaning of, it will probably be easier for you to remember some of these term meanings. Here are some more prefixes. Hypo, that's another one that means below, so this is a good time to point out that many times there are either word roots or prefixes or suffixes that mean the same thing. And here are Here are some suffixes. I think we had ectomy, we had ovariohysterectomy, surgical removal of, so there's that suffix, but you can see there are many more, and yet more. So again, all of the ones for sure that are here in this lecture, make sure you know. And then any other supplemental material that I give you, whether it's homework or extra handouts, those would be terms that I consider important, and you should learn them, study them, so that you can apply them in practice. There are many suffixes that mean pertaining to. So we had the OUS, subcutaneous, earlier, but any of these could be tacked on to the end of a root word and would mean pertaining to. So these are important ones to realize the meaning of. Here's that piece about combining. So basically what I say is just try it out, and whatever makes the most sense, pronunciation-wise, go with that. So for instance, this last example, cardi is heart, itis is inflammation. Instead of saying cardiitis, we're going to take out one of those I's and just say carditis. Okay, so you don't want to make it excessively clunky to pronounce, and in general, if you eliminate a vowel to make it more easy to pronounce, then that's probably the correct combining form, or combining end form. So I'm going to have some handouts for you. Of course, your text has a whole chapter on medical terminology. Like I said, memorization is going to be required, so whatever it works for you, whether it's flashcards, online games, practice is going to be key for anybody. And realize again that some of these terms are also going to have multiple, or some of these meanings are going to have multiple terms referring to them. For instance, mouth. Oro and stomato both mean mouth. Okay. So just excuse me, kind of as an ending note here, let's use this example of dog skull shapes to look at some ways that we can apply these terms. So all of these have this last piece, cephalic. So the cephalic piece means cephalo is head. So if we break it down, we've got cephal, and the O is removed because we've got IC at the end, meaning pertaining to. So instead of saying cephalo-alic, we say cephalic, and that means pertaining to the head. And then we've got these various or differing first words, or first, I guess we'll call them, some of them, we'll call them root words, okay? Because really they are root words, with dolicho, brachy, and meso having different meanings. So dolicho means long, brachy means short, and meso means sort of middle length. So we've got this saluki, it looks like, which we are going to call a dolichocephalic dog because of the shape of its skull, which is a long, skinny nose. We've got this little boxer here who has a short, squished-in nose, and we're going to term that guy a brachycephalic dog. And then many dogs, which are kind of somewhere in the middle, like our golden retriever, we would call those mesocephalic, as far as the head shape is concerned. So that's just an example of how we would use these terms, using word roots, suffixes, and using them to describe what the skull shape looks like. So I'm going to stop here. We'll pick up the rest of this lecture in the next video.